everybody to post your questions in the chat box. We will address all of those at the end of the presentation. And also, if you could just mute your microphone to, avoid any noises, that would be great as well. So welcome everybody. And Vanessa, floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Good morning. So in today's presentation, we'll give a brief overview of the Community Opportunity Readiness Program. We'll discuss various funding supports available, whether it's for a community-owned business or other economic opportunities. We'll go over the 2021-22 intake process, and then at the very end, we'll have time for questions and answers. The Community Opportunity Readiness Program, or as we'll be referring to as Corp throughout this presentation for short, provides project-based funding to support First Nation communities in their pursuit of and in participation in economic opportunities. Corp supports opportunities that will generate community economic benefits, such as employment, business revenues, and or leasing revenues. We have two processes for Corp. We have the BC regional process for projects under 250,000, and that's the one we recently sent a call for proposals, or application, sorry. The regional process is one that we'll be going through in more detail in today's presentation. We also have Corp Prioritization Framework National Process, which is for equity gap projects and shovel-ready economic infrastructure projects that are over 250,000. That call out went out in, I believe it was early November, and the due date for that was December 4th. If you did miss that deadline though, and you have shovel-ready projects, please do let us know. And if there is a second call out, we'll be sure to reach out. And we can also send you the shovel-ready criteria so you can ensure that you have everything ready for the next call out.
You shower?
Yeah.
Support for a community-owned business. So this would be a single community business. Corp can provide support for activities such as a feasibility study, a business plan, or other related planning documents that will lead to the establishment or startup of the business, an acquisition or expansion of that business. Equity gap projects that are under 250,000. You can actually apply to an Aboriginal Financial Institute, while if it's over 250,000, you can apply to our national process. So an equity gap project is the amount of money needed to finance a business after all other funding sources have been contributed their maximum. And the financial support will enable the business to obtain debt financing to carry out viable business plan, again, either for a startup, expansion, or acquisition. If a community wants to start up a new community-owned business, they would first need to ensure the concept for that business is supported by a community planning document, such as an economic development plan, a land use plan, or a comprehensive community plan, any plan that included community engagement. Community can then apply to Corp for business planning activities, again, such as the feasibility business plan. And ultimately, the planning document should demonstrate that the business is viable before it goes on to proceeding to the next stage. So this diagram shows the stages of economic infrastructure projects. Year one is typically the pre-planning stage, which includes various assessments and studies. And then once pre-planning is complete, the next stage would include costs associated with the design and any other soft costs required to get the project ready for construction stage. And for both the planning and the design stage, a community can apply to the Corp Regional for up to 80% of total eligible costs. And once all the planning has been completed and the project meets the Corp shovel-ready criteria, the community can then apply to our national process for site servicing infrastructure funding, and that's up to a maximum of 66.67% of eligible costs. And for the national process, I should say, for the maximum, while it's 66.67%, the maximum amount is $3 million that you can apply for. So if a community wants to develop a parcel of land for commercial use, they will again need to ensure the opportunity is supported by a community plan. Community can then apply to Corp Regional for the analysis and assessment of opportunity. So this is a part of the pre-planning phase we just talked about, which can include activities such as a site assessment, and that can include environmental assessment, which these can sometimes take up to a year. So it's best to do these early on, as well as archaeological and geotechnical assessments. Some of those reports can come back and they may identify specific areas where more investigation is needed. So these are good to do early on. And these assessments can be for projects either on reserve or on feasible land. You can also apply for a highest and best use study. These help identify the best opportunities for your specific area, keeping in mind the community needs and priorities. Identification of potential anchor tenants, potential leasing opportunities. One of the shovel-ready criteria is that there is an anchor tenant. So identifying who that anchor tenant might be early on, or what the opportunities for leasing could be, and as well as conceptual site planning. Visuals are always helpful to have. So planning, master planning, and conceptual site planning, as well as community meetings. It's always good to engage members early on. So after the pre-planning, the community can apply for the design, construction, planning costs. So this includes permits, engineering designs, detailed cost estimates, negotiations for servicing agreements with the municipality. And then finally, the community can apply to the Corp National for the site servicing infrastructure costs, assuming they meet the shovel-ready criteria. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over now to Don Potter.
Thanks, Vanessa. So this slide here is just an overview of the intake process for this year. It's changed a little bit this year. We're asking for applications, full applications, not statement of intent, and we're asking a little later. So the call for proposals is now underway. I think we sent that out in January. For project screening, which is something that is also new, please contact your ISC EDO as soon as possible. And that's up to March 15th, which is the application due date. Application due date, submit application by 15th with all the attachments. And at that point, the ISC project reviewer will rank. Next slide. This is a little bit more specific on that last overview. So like I said, the call is now underway, and that was in January 20th. And please talk to your economic development officer as soon as possible, because then that'll give you a chance to kind of get all the information that you need for that application due date. And also we can vet the project to make sure that it is eligible. Again, the application due date is the 15th. And we will review when we receive that application. So if we do receive that application earlier than the 15th, then we do have a chance to get those comments and feedback earlier to the nation, and then possibly even have, if it does go to approval, have that approval date sooner. For the review and selection process, some of the considerations that we have, has there been ISC project funding in the last 3 years? First Nation employment, First Nation partner in commercial financing, and the project land status. So what is the status of the land? If it's on reserve, what's the designation status? If it's off reserve, what is the zoning status? And the ISK Economic Development Officer will communicate the status of that review and ranking. So again, the funding approvals, so that'll happen from when we receive the application and review it, go through that process to most likely about May. So this is now underway, the project screening with the economic development officers. Some of the things we will discuss. First, is the project eligible? Will this project make money? Will this is it an economic development opportunity? We do have a rough 5-to-1 ratio, which we can calculate, and this is to determine the eligibility. So if it is a project that we don't think that the money that we're putting into the project will get at least 5 times in return, then it would not be eligible. The next point is that the applicant is eligible. So this is First Nation, Tribal Council, or Indigenous government with a master funding agreement through ISK. So if you are in a situation where you have a corporation, that money would most likely have to go through the First Nation to the corporation. Reporting, so we have to make sure that all the reporting is up to date, and this includes all past Corp funding. Also audits, so the most latest audit would be the 1920, so that should be at least received, the 1920 audit. The project should be identified in a community economic development plan, land use plan, or comprehensive community plan. Any plan that was developed by the community, vetted by the community. We're trying to see that the project has support from the community. Land status, again, if applicable, is land controlled by the nation, either on reserve or off, and owned by the nation. Also, what is the designation or zoning status of that land? Another thing to note is only one submission per recipient. Next one, please, sir, Vanessa. So for the full application that's to be received March 15th, what we're looking for is we need to know what the project is. We need a detailed kind of description of the project. What is the opportunity? What are we trying to achieve? And it must, included in that, we must be identified in a community plan, economic plan, land use plan, or comprehensive community plan. And we should have a copy of that attached to the application. We should see what the activities are that we're looking to support. So there should be a work plan in that. There should be a description of who's going to undertake that work, including their experience and credentials. We need the breakdown of all costs, including a minimum of 3 quotes for professional services or confirmation of previous completed tendering process. So if you're in year 2 of the project and year 1, you went through a process of selecting a consultant, just let us know what that information is. Show us that tendering process, and you can go with that same consultant for year 2. We do need a band council resolution for the First Nation contribution, which is a minimum of 10% cash contribution. The ISK maximum is 80%, so there's also the other 10% that needs to be spoken to as well. You can talk to your EDO about the timing of submitting the BCR if the nation only meets, or council only meets once a month, and you're anticipating that'll be the next month. Just let us know and we'll put that into the documentation. Okay, thanks. Oh, next will be Josh speaking to the review and ranking.
Thanks, Don. So yeah, I just wanted to go over the screening, ranking, and assessment that we go through, just a little bit more in depth. So to begin, we do have a ranking criteria, and it includes whether the project is a new project. So if you haven't submitted an application in the last 3 years, you generally rank pretty high in that criteria. Also, if it's a continuation project, so if you've received Corp funding in the past and it's a good opportunity and you need a little bit more funding to complete some work to get it to a certain state, then that would also increase your score as well. A few points are awarded for remote and isolated communities, as well as nations with higher income assistance or dependency rates. And if a nation has partner equity contributions, so if a nation is contributing, note that the minimum that the nation has to submit is 10% cash contribution for the project, but if they have a little bit more, or if they have partner equity, that also contributes to the ranking criteria. So when we move on to the assessment, we take a look at the proposed activities and making sure that they support an economic opportunity. So making sure that it is an economic development opportunity and it can earn revenue for the nation. We're looking at whether the work plan is achievable within the timelines given, as well as that the costs are reasonable. So we've been, with this process, we're asking for 3 quotes. And so we're looking to see that, those quotes are reasonable, and as well as that the management capacity of the applicant, as well as any of the professional services are there. So we take a look, and we generally ask for a resume or a CV to make sure that the credentials are there. Next slide, please. And so upon approval, we generally do an amendment to the master agreement. So that would go to the holder of the master agreement. So usually the band or the tribal council. We'd send out the proposed statement of work for your review, and that'll outline the approved activities and deliverables for the project. It'll also outline the cash flow and any milestones, as well as the funding cycle. So when funding should be expected to be received. It'll also show the interim reporting requirements and deliverables, and the final report and deliverables. These will be due May 31st, in this case 2022, as outlined in the agreement. We also do take a look at the audit as well. So we expect that all the funding is shown in an audit schedule, and all the related expenditures are also shown, so we can see whether the total cost is lower than expected, and we want to make sure that it matches up with the maximum approved % of funding. So this is where we can run into some issues where the audit will show, let's say, fully expended, however, revenues of, let's say, 100,000 and expenditures of 100,000. The maximum we are allowed to approve under the program is 80% for Corp regional. So that actually wouldn't be considered fully expended because the idea is that there is a cost share, and the nation has to provide at least 10%. And so the percentages as listed in the statement of work have to be adhered to. So there may be some issues there with how the percentages are calculated, and so we definitely want to make sure that you're spending over and above the amount that we provide, as there's a cost share that we have to adhere to. I believe Julia will be speaking next on lobbying.
Thanks, Josh. I'm Julia Christensen. I'm the acting manager for the Economic Development Unit. And as Don said earlier, we are going through the screening process, and we want to encourage you, if you have an idea, even if you're not quite sure what you want to apply for, please call either Don, Josh, or Vanessa, or email them, set up a time to talk to them, and they can give you some feedback or early information about what you might be planning on doing, and let you know whether it's ready to go to Corp or not, or to apply to Corp or not. So we do want to encourage you to work together with the economic development officers on our team, and we want to make the process as easy as possible. We know it's not exactly the easiest necessarily to understand all the ins and outs of the program. I did add a slide on lobbying just because we do sometimes get the calls from consultants about applying to the program, and we just wanted to provide you a reminder that if the consultant wants to apply on your behalf or talk to ISC officers on your behalf, they should go to Lobby Canada and find out about registering as a lobbyist, because that is an activity that the Office of Lobbying does consider lobbying when consultants come and talk to us. So we want to make it as easy as possible for our First Nation clients to find out about the program. So do please reach out to us. I'll go to the next slide, and that has the contact information for our team. So David Russell is our director. I'm Julia Christensen, the acting manager, and Dawn, Vanessa, and Joshua are the 3 economic development officers who are standing by, waiting for your call or email to talk about your project idea. Thanks, and I'll pass it over to you, Svetlana.
Thank you, Julia. So this concludes the presentation. Now, if anybody has any questions at all, please feel free to type it into a chat box or raise your hand, and we will answer your questions. Okay, so I see a couple of questions are coming in, and there is a raised hand. So the first question is, what if we don't have an economic development plan?
I'll try to answer that one. So we used to have a program that would fund economic development plans. At this time, funding was discontinued. We can, however, consider them. So what we are doing, if a nation is looking for an economic development plan, just let us know. And if any money comes up that comes available that we can use to help you with that, we can help you make an economic development plan. But keep in mind that the project, it doesn't necessarily have to be an economic development plan. It can be a comprehensive community plan. It can be any sort of planning document or even strategic plan that has this project mentioned as a priority for the community that the community has looked at and supports.
Perfect. Next question. Can the nation government and the nation business group each apply to the grant?
I can answer this one. So it's we have to have a master agreement with the whoever's applying. So typically we have master agreements with First Nations and some tribal councils. We don't usually have one with the Economic Development Corporation. So most of we ask that usually that the recipient applies. And we actually would only accept one application per community as well.
Perfect. Are you able to share names of some of the Aboriginal financial institutions with the group?
Is the, I'm just asking my group here, is the Corp website, is that up to date with all the AFIs? I think it's on there, so we can share the Corp guidelines, which has the last page, I think, has the AFIs.
Yeah, I'll mention them quickly. It's All Nations Trust in Kamloops, Tribal Resources Investment Council in Prince Rupert, New Channel Economic Development Corporation in Port Alberni, and Taliut Aboriginal Capital Corporation in West Vancouver. Those are the 4 Aboriginal financial institutions that have the federal funding for business equity at under the $250,000. It's the former Aboriginal Business Development Program. Thanks.
Thank you. There's a question about the PowerPoint presentation. Yes, we will send it out to everybody who attended today's session, and it will also be posted on the Candu website. Next question, as a community development corporation member is the First Nation, can we apply?
I'm just trying to figure out what that means there as far as a member is the First Nation. So again, it would just, it's about, I guess there's two things. It's about the master agreement and support from the nation. So obviously the ECDEV Corporation can complete the application, but at the end of the day, the money would go through the community and it would need community support. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay. Is a project, if a project involves partnership with a third party, such as business entity, is this allowed? How does it affect the Corp application?
So this is allowed. We need a 51% ownership from the community. And we sometimes, or most of the time, we do have a kind of a prorated contribution depending on the ownership structure.
Great. Next question is a two-part question. The first part is how much funding is eligible max? And the second part is the 5-to-1 criteria flexible? Due to COVID, so many businesses are affected. You're suggesting a mid-range during a global pandemic and economic collapse.
So for the regional process, the maximum you can apply for is up to 250,000, and that's of eligible costs. So there is a whole list of what's eligible on the Corp website. And then, sorry, what was the second question?
Is the 5-to-1 criteria flexible?
I mean, if it's in the early pre-planning stages, you know, the 5-to-1, I guess it's really, the 5-to-1 really applies to projects once they're more in the design construction costs, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but we look at that especially for once the project has done some of the pre-planning. As long
I'd agree with Vanessa there. Really, the 5-to-1 is a projection, and any business, you know, most businesses will meet that 5-to-1 ratio. Yeah. It's not just the revenues; it's also to do with employment, even capital that's invested into the project. So the 5-to-1. The projects, I'll just give an example of a project that might not meet the 5-to-1, and that would be something like a recreational facility. Although that would have employment for the nation, because there's no revenues coming in as far as user fees, that sort of thing, or large revenues coming in. Typically, recreation facilities don't meet that 5-to-1 criteria. But any business typically would meet that 5-to-1 criteria because you're looking at those revenues coming in.
Great, thank you. Can the economic development apply for a new project when the nation is closing up previous Corp dollars?
I can answer that one. Yeah, they can. We just require that all the reporting be submitted. So we usually ask for all reporting, whether it's overdue or if it's overdue, to be submitted for you to be eligible. Also, it may affect your scoring depending on whether the project is a completely new project and you've received funding for a different project last year. You may not necessarily score high on that criteria, but on the other criteria, it wouldn't be affected.
Perfect. What's the difference between this Corp to the previous Corp funding that was announced?
So this Corp is for Corp Regional. So this is for projects that are under $250,000, usually soft costs and things like that, business planning. The previous call for proposals back in, well, the due date was December 4th. That was for Corp Prioritization Framework, Corp PF. That was for the $3 million potential projects for infrastructure or business acquisitions and things like that. That would have to go to the national review table where we'd have to present, and it's a little bit different than this call.
Are there restrictions if we have interest in cannabis business or IR lands?
I can try to answer that. So those are actually lifted. There was a few years ago when there were restrictions with the Corp program with cannabis, but those have been lifted obviously with the legalization of cannabis. Typically though, that we were only looking at the high level costs for our program, because once you start getting into the design and permitting, all those sorts of things, you need to talk to the AFIs. We have heard that AFIs don't do this. If that's the case, just let us know that you've gone to the AFI first and that they've said that they cannot do it. Oh, AFI is the Aboriginal Financial Institute. So those are those organizations like NEDC and TAC that Julia was mentioned before in ANCO.
Okay, next question. What does AFI mean?
Oh, sorry, that's what I just answered there, Svetlana. I was looking at it as well.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sorry, I've got a question for you. Are there any businesses that are ineligible for Corp funding? I mean, obviously all illegal type businesses would be, but are there any specific businesses that, you know, even though they are legal, like let's say, for example, cannabis or gaming or, you know, those types of things, are those ineligible for this Corp funding?
That's a good question, Dawn. I actually do not have an answer for casinos. I do know that there are some activities. I think there are some activities that aren't eligible if there's any sort of exploitation involved.
What about if we were looking at like a microbrewery or something like that? I mean,
yeah, that's as far as I know that's eligible. Someone might correct me if I'm wrong, but.
Or a video lottery terminal lounge or something like that. Cannabis dispenser.
Hey, Dawn, if I can, I'm going with that. I believe specifically for the ineligible one you're talking about, you're not allowed it for alcohol, tobacco, gaming, and sexually exploitive activities.
Oh, okay, so alcohol is mentioned in there.
As well as passive retail investments. Any kind of passive investments wouldn't be.
So real estate.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So
Michael.
that would be obviously like the production of like the wholesaling or distribution of alcohol or anything like that. So like craft breweries would be out, vineyards would be out, those types of things.
On the craft brewery and vineyards, I think we'll have to look into that because I think we have funded some of those. So
You know, that could have been lifted when the cannabis was lifted as well.
yeah, so
Can you clarify?
yeah, we can look into that and verify because I do believe we have funded some like that. So it must have been lifted.
Next question. What if we can't get a quote for 3 professional services or confirmation of a previous tender?
We do want to look at as many quotes as you can. If you can't, we can consider a single quote. But in general, we do look for multiple quotes, and we want to make sure that the costs quoted are reasonable. But we understand there are cases where it's not always possible.
And if you have a process where you sent, like, let's say you sent requests for quotes to 5 different consultants and you only received 2, well, just let us know that and show us that, yeah, you sent it out to 5 and you had either no response or responses that consultants weren't interested. Just let us know, as long as the process took place.
Perfect. Are there any restrictions for a band-owned company or business that is located on reserve, but all work is done off reserve within traditional territory?
So I mean, if the business is located on reserve, and I guess maybe we need more information about what type of work is being done off reserve. I mean, if it's planning and stuff like that, I don't see that being an issue. We might need more details about that to really determine if it would be eligible or not.
I'll dovetail this question. For example, there are only a couple of marine gas pump suppliers in the region. Okay, disregard previous Q, already answered by Dawn. Thanks. Okay, any other questions? There's a comment saying, thanks for the excellent presentation, guys.
Welcome. Thanks for participating and thanks for all the questions.
Do you have a manual for business startups?
We don't, but there are some online resources. The Aboriginal financial institutions have some links to starting businesses, and there used
I think
to be
small business BC as well.
Yeah,
Too.
yeah, Small Business BC, which is a provincial site. They have links on, you know, templates for business plans and information.
Free training as well.
Yeah.
And Jamie has just added that BCAFN has the black books.
Thanks, Jamie.
And he shared the link here in the chat window if anybody's interested.
Yeah, it's Jamie here. On that, I work for the BCFN. I'm a special advisor to the regional chief. So part of our portfolio is economic development. So I'd put forward to folks on the line from the nations, if you have any questions, you know, get a hold of our team. We can also provide some additional support and advocacy support on some of this. And the black books was designed to help support individual entrepreneurs, chief councils. It's kind of an ECDEV 101. So hopefully it's useful.
Perfect. Is there a list of consultants? Adam is asking.
I think the best, if you're looking for a consultant or a list of consultant, the best thing to do is possibly talk to a neighboring First Nation, see if, you know, who they've dealt with and what their experiences have been with different consultants. There are other lists out there online, and we tend to not want to promote or kind of recommend any consultants because that's not fair to the ones we don't recommend. So I think the best thing to do is just to talk to a neighboring First Nation.
And Michael says, wanted to update that the updated 2020 Corp guidelines only list sexually explicit activities as ineligible. So tobacco, gaming, and alcohol should not be ineligible businesses. And then Adam is saying that's fair, but is there a registry of sorts when it comes to the consultants?
Not that I know of, at least not with us, not with ISC.
And there's a question on where the PowerPoint will be on Candu's website. If you go and search for webinars, it will be under that heading, but I will send out a copy of the PowerPoint presentation to everybody right after this webinar, this afternoon for sure. The AFIs may be able to help find a consultant. Will AFIs be able to help find a consultant?
The AFIs they can help probably with the consultants strictly on the business development side. On the infrastructure development, they may not have a list like that, but I'm sure on the business side, they would probably have some support in how to find a consultant.
Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. We'll give it a couple more minutes. Well, here's another question. Do the AFIs help with business plans?
Yes, part of the funding they receive, federal funding they deliver, Business Equity Fund, is to help support business plans. I believe it's up to 75% of costs, but they usually will help support those business plans if it's a business that they will eventually help finance. But you can talk to the AFIs about that. And yeah, the AFIs, just to add to that, they support both entrepreneurs, so individuals, as well as community-based businesses or community-owned businesses. Our program is only for community-owned businesses. So at the entrepreneur levels, the AFIs can provide that support. And for community-owned businesses, AFIs can also provide the support, or more typically, communities will come to us for that support.
Well, I'm wondering if there are no more questions, should we just wrap it up? All right, Don, Vanessa, Josh, Julia.
Yeah, I think if there's no more questions, we can wrap up.
Thank you, Svetlana, for hosting us.
Well, thank you so much, Josh and Don and Vanessa and Julia, for the informative presentation. And thank you, everybody in attendance, for your time. I'll send out the presentation. And if you have any questions, yes, please reach out to economic development officers, program officers. So thank you, everybody, and have a great afternoon and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks.